Back to Ecclesiastes chapter 7. I'm really excited to get to that verse 17 that is a bit puzzling when it says, "Be not overmuch wicked." I don't know if I'm going to make it today, though, but I'm anxious. But the outline is there if you want to take a sneak preview and steal my thunder, then just go ahead. But anyway, we left off last Sunday at verse 14, and I have some additional thoughts that I want to make about this, because this verse is life. If you haven't found this out yet, you haven't lived long enough. In verse 14, and remember, we are given two things to consider. Verse 13, the work of God that we can't make straight, what He made crooked. And then in verse 14, in the day of adversity, consider. Let's read the verse though. "In the day of prosperity be joyful, in the day of adversity consider, for God also hath set the one against the other, to the end that man should find nothing after him." In the day of prosperity be joyful, and it's rightful that we should, because God gives us richly all things to enjoy. And we're supposed to serve Him with gladness in the abundance of all things. So if God is blessing you to abound, don't use those things God has given you as an excuse for not serving Him. Use it as an incentive to serve Him and to do so with gladness. But inevitably, that day will pass and give way to the day of adversity. And when that happens, it says consider. The word consider means to contemplate mentally, to fix the mind upon, to think over, meditate, or reflect on, bestow attentive thought upon, give heed to, take note of. The Bible teaches us to consider, to stop in the rush of life. Turn off the TV, and for God's sake, turn off the music. Allow yourself some quietness and think and reflect on what's going on in your life, particularly when it is a situation of adversity, for you're told to do that. As Matthew Henry said, we cannot answer God's end in afflicting us unless we consider why and wherefore He contends with us. So it pays to stop and think about why the adversity is there. It may be there's a chastening. You need to examine yourself, see if there's unconfessed, unforsaken sin in your life, and take care of it. But it may not be there for that reason at all. It may be as a trial of your faith, something that needs purging, something that needs strengthening, maybe an adjusting of your priorities. You won't know unless you stop and think about it. So in the day of adversity, consider. And remember that God hath set the one against the other. So ultimately, prosperity and adversity have to be traced up to God, who has the control of all things. Now, I just want to reread again something that Charles Bridges said about this, why adversity and prosperity are set over against one another in our life experience. He said, either without the other, that is, adversity without prosperity or prosperity without adversity, either without the other would be defective in operation. The day of prosperity would be dangerous exaltation. If everything always went the way you like it, and you were always prospering, you'd begin to think too highly of yourself. This is why the Apostle Paul wrote these words, I remind you again, in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 7, "And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan, to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure." Paul was a man that was singled out above all other men with an abundance of revelation from God. He wrote 14 books of our 27 books of the New Testament. The largest chunk of the New Testament was composed by him. And it'd be very easy for that to go to his head, but God sent adversity to bring him down. So you see, to just have all prosperity and no adversity, we begin to think too highly of ourselves. But then if it's all adversity and no prosperity, then that could lead to fainting and despondency. And so God balances the one against the other. So we read it, for example, in Psalm 125:3. And then this is a general rule, just a general rule. This is the way it is with most folks. In Psalm 125:3, "For the rod of the wicked shall not rest upon the lot of the righteous, lest the righteous put forth their hands unto iniquity." So God knows how to put restraints on the rod of the wicked so that it doesn't drive us to a point that we give up our faith or commit iniquity in just total despondency, which some people do. And then in Isaiah chapter 57 and verse 16, the Lord says, I will not contend forever, neither will I always be wroth. For the spirit should fail before me and the souls which I have made. If we just only experienced the wrath of God, we'd all faint under the weight of it. And so God balances it out. And I know this from personal experience. Sometimes when I have a lot of problems I'm dealing with and just dark and gloomy days, and somebody will call me and give me some good news or tell me a joke that'll make me laugh. And I'll say, that's just what I needed. Just when I needed a break from the adversity. Something to balance out what I'm going through. Now, why does God do this in our lives? Why do we have the day of adversity, the day of prosperity? Why is that? To the end that man should find nothing after him. Now remember, this actually ties back to something we've already considered. And you'll see this as we go through Ecclesiastes, as some of the points he's already made, he will make again. You know, we learn by repetition. We stir up pure minds by way of remembrance. Nothing wrong with saying it again. I've had people that wish I'd preach on some things again. And I will, God willing. But in Ecclesiastes, remember, there was this constant world of change in which everything is counted and reversed. Time to be born, time to die. Time to plant, time to pluck up that which is planted. Time to kill, time to heal, time to break down, time to build up. Time to weep, time to laugh, time to mourn, time to dance. A time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away. Think about your life, how much we spend accumulating, and then toward the end of your life, you start getting rid of stuff. Or figuring out who's going to take it over when you're gone. Because you're going to go out of this world just like you came into it, with nothing. And so, you know, we experience this in life, and it's just letting us know that really there's nothing sure in this world that we can count on. We can never be sure what the next day will bring, whether it will bring prosperity or whether it will bring adversity. To the end that we may see that there's nothing after us. We go out like we came in. You see, the point in all of this is there is nothing in this world that you can always count on except God. That's it. He is the only constant. There's no guarantee you're going to keep your job, no guarantee you're going to keep your house, no guarantee you're going to keep your health, no guarantee that the people that are so much a part of your life today are going to be there tomorrow. None of us knows but what tomorrow will be that dreaded, that thing we think of, and yet we don't want to think about it because it's so disturbing. We get that phone call or we get that knock at the door, and it's the police officer to tell us that somebody we dearly love has been killed in an automobile accident. My granddaughter today has to go to work because her boss's husband has suddenly been struck with some illness. He's in the hospital, and they don't expect him to live like that. Her whole world has been turned upside down. Her whole world has been shattered like that. We never know. Day of prosperity, day of adversity. And you can see this balance out expressed more extensively if you look at Psalm 30, which is really a commentary on our verse in Psalm 30. Psalm 30. So while it's good, rejoice, but when the adversity comes, stop and think about what's going on. Consider. You know, one reason God takes things away from us is maybe we depended on it more than we should. And we need to learn that He is still there, a constant and an ever-present help when others have been taken away. In Psalm chapter 30, Psalm 30. I'm going to take you down to verse 5. For His anger endureth but for a moment. In His favor is life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. You see the balance there, the adversity, the prosperity. See it? And in my prosperity, I said, I shall never be moved. Everything is just the way I want it, and it's going to stay that way. Oh no, oh no. Lord, by Thy favor Thou hast made my mountain to stand strong. Now the day of adversity pops up. Thou didst hide thy face, and I was troubled. I cried to thee, O Lord, and unto the Lord I made supplication. What profit is there in my blood when I go down to the pit? Shall the dust praise thee? Shall it declare thy truth? One day his mountain is standing strong. The next day he's wondering if he's going to survive. That's just how quickly it can change. Hear me, O Lord, and have mercy upon me. Lord, be thou my helper. See, notice this brings him to recognize the one and only constant for help is God. Thou hast turned for me my mourning, there's the adversity, into dancing, there's the prosperity. And hast put off my sackcloth, there's the adversity, and girded me with gladness, there's the prosperity. To the end that my glory may sing praise to thee and not be silent, the glory there referring to his tongue. O Lord my God, I will give thanks unto thee forever. But you see that back and forth, that just finally throws him on God alone as his helper. As his helper. We come to Psalm 62. My mind is filled with all kinds of experiences in life where I've been through this, been down this road. I remember when I had to take a doctrinal stand on the sonship of Christ that cost me my reputation in the entire denomination in which I was ordained. And all I had was just this one church that had called me and this one pulpit in which I could preach. And I remember, I think we were having a prayer meeting or something like that, and I remember saying, you know, all the other support has been ripped out from under me. I only have God to rely on. And Stuart Crane said, well, that's really the way it's supposed to be. And he was right. And then God opened more doors to me and pulpits than I could fill, because we started having evangelism and things started spreading. So it's amazing how the Lord balances these things out. But He'll put you through these narrow straits and adversities as a test and to see where your confidence really is. And so that's why we read words like this in Psalm 62, 5 through 10. Psalm 62, 5 through 10. My soul, wait thou only upon God. Get that only. I've got it underlined. For my expectation is from Him. Verse 6. He only. Nobody else. He only. Not your spouse, not your children, not your pastor. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be moved. In God is my salvation and my glory, the rock of my strength and my refuge is in God. Trust in Him at all times, ye people. Pour out your heart before Him. God is a refuge for us. Selah. And this will never change. This is the one constant that you can always count on. Surely men of low degree are vanity, and men of high degree are a lie. To be laid in the balance, they are altogether lighter than vanity. Trust not in oppression, become not vain in robbery. If riches increase, there's the prosperity, set not your heart upon them, because if there's anything about riches, they can go as easily and as quickly as they come. As the Bible says, they take wings and fly. I sometimes think that's why an eagle appears on a dollar bill, just to remind us. It'll fly out of your hands just as quick as it came into it. Maybe we're being taught something there, even by the government. Federal Reserve, no less. See, sometimes they hit it right. In Philippians chapter 4, therefore, the one great lesson we should draw from this constant balance of prosperity and adversity is to learn this lesson. Taught us well in Philippians 4:11 through 13. A learned behavior, as I pointed out. It's not something that just comes naturally to us selfish sinners that always want what we want when we want it. So we've got to learn in every situation we're in school and out of school, in work and out of work, in relationships and out of relationships, in money and out of money. Verse 11, now that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state. Oh, I just want to move somewhere else, anywhere but Michigan, like there's going to be a problem-free life somewhere else. I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. I know both how to obey abased, there's the adversity. I know how to abound, there's the prosperity. Everywhere and in all things I'm instructed. See again, this adversity, prosperity thing is a school we're going through. It's teaching us something. It's teaching us where our real strength is, what the real constant is, and to learn contentment in whatever state we find ourselves. I know both how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I'm instructed. Both to be full, prosperity, to be hungry, adversity, both to abound, prosperity, to suffer need, adversity. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. Now, let's go back to Ecclesiastes. We finished with that verse. We come to the next one. In verse 15. All things have I seen in the days of my vanity, in the days of my nothingness. There is a just man that perisheth in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man that prolongeth his life in his wickedness. Now, the first thing I just want to point out in passing is Solomon refers to his life as the days of my vanity. And when you compare a human life with eternity, our life here is just a little speck of nothing. Really, it is. And that's why in this verse, I've referred to it before, probably will refer to it again because it so capsulizes what Solomon is setting forward in Ecclesiastes. When he says in Psalm 39:4, Lord, make me to know mine end and the measure of my days, what it is, that I may know how frail I am. Because thou hast made my days as an handbreadth, and mine age is as nothing before thee. So it's just days of vanity, days of nothingness. Verily every man at his best state is altogether vanity, altogether nothing. And then in James 4:14, these words, whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It's even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. That's days of vanity, if I've ever seen it described. But he notices while he's living down here in this little brief life, two things that cause righteous people to be confused and stumble, and also cause wicked people to be emboldened against righteousness. And that is, he sees a just man that perishes in his righteousness. He dies doing the right thing. Maybe even dies because he's doing the right thing, perishing in his righteousness. And then a wicked man prolonging his days in his wickedness. And the interesting thing is that the first perishing that we have recorded in our Bible is in Genesis 4:1-8. You familiar with the story? It was the murder of Abel. And why was Abel murdered? Because he did the right thing. God had respect to Abel's offering, but he had not respect to Cain's offering, and Cain was envious and killed him. In fact, the commentary on that passage is 1 John chapter 3 and verse 12. Not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore slew he him? Why did he kill him? Why did Abel perish? Because his own works, Cain's own works, were evil, and his brother's righteous. This was the first martyr in the cause of God and truth. All Solomon had to do was crack his Bible, and right there he saw a just man perishing in his righteousness. And many such there have been, and yet wicked people prolonging their life in their wickedness. This observation has, as I said, perplexed believers over the years. I'm going to read some passages that show you the confusion, the perplexity believers have had when they've seen this happen. Come over to Job chapter 21. This one bothered Job, and he posited this question. In Job chapter 21, Job 21:7, wherefore do the wicked live, become old, and yea, are mighty in power? Their seed is established in their sight, with them and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, and neither is the rod of God upon them. Their bull gendereth and faileth not, and the cow calveth and casteth not her calf. They send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. They take the timbrel and harp and rejoice at the sound of the organ. They spend their days in wealth, and in a moment go down to the grave. Therefore they say unto God, Depart from us, for we desire not the knowledge of thy ways. What do we need with religion? We got a good life like it is. What is the Almighty that we should serve Him? And what profit should we have if we pray unto Him? So you see, Job is saying, why is that? Why are there people that can get away with that and have a long life and their kids and just a great party life from all appearances? Then come over to Psalm 73 and look at how this very same thing tripped up the psalmist, Asaph. Psalm 73, look at verse 1. Truly God is good to Israel, even to such as are of a clean heart. But as for me, my feet were almost gone. I'm at verse 2 of Psalm 73. My steps had well nigh slipped. For I was envious at the foolish when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm. They're not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. Therefore pride compasseth them about as a chain, violence covereth them as a garment. Their eyes stand out with fatness, and they have more than heart could wish. They are corrupt and speak wickedly. Concerning oppression they speak loftily. They set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue walketh through the earth. If there has ever been a time in human history when the tongue of the wicked walks through the earth, it is in this our day with mass media where whatever wicked people say travels around the globe like that. You cannot outrun a King James Bible any way you try. It's amazing, isn't it? Therefore His people return hither, and the waters of a full cup are wrung out to them. And they say, How doth God know? And is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the ungodly who prosper in the world. They increase in riches. And then He looks and says, But what about me? I'm trying to do the right thing, and look at my life. Verily, I've cleansed my heart in vain and washed my hands in innocency. For all the day long I've been plagued and chastened every morning. Here I am, day after day, plagued, chastened. And here are these wicked people. They have no bands in their death. They just live their life and then they die. It's not like they're bound up with some illness for a long time that just hinders their being able to get about and do what they want to do. And this is puzzling to the psalmist. And then I like the way Jeremiah puts it. He struggled with this also. Jeremiah didn't have, as far as numbers and popularity are concerned, he didn't have a real prosperous ministry. Most of the people that Jeremiah preached to rejected what he had to say, persecuted him for what he had to say. Didn't listen. Didn't listen. And so here in Jeremiah 12:1 he says, Righteous art thou, O Lord. Now, Lord, before I talk with you about this, let's make one thing real plain. You are right. I know that. You're always right. You never make mistakes, Lord. You are righteous. But, O Lord, when I plead with thee, yet let me talk with thee of thy judgments. Let's talk about some of these decisions you make, Lord. Some of these judgments you make. Wherefore doth the way of the wicked prosper? And wherefore are all they happy that deal very treacherously? You see, he's got this same problem Job had, same problem Asaph had. Something doesn't seem to be jiving here. And so this idea of a righteous man perishing in his righteousness while the wicked prolong their life in wickedness perplexes believers. And it still does today. But it also causes some unbelievers particularly to think that serving God is not worth it. Maybe some kid grows up in a home and watches his mother, a faithful, devout woman, dying with a miserable cancer death, and deciding if there's a loving God in heaven, why would He make a good woman like that suffer that kind of stuff? Witnessing it with his own two eyes and decided God's not worth it and giving up altogether because of this. It happens, people. It happens, people. If there is a God in heaven, why do children suffer? Why is there misery? Why is there pain in the world? Why do wicked people get away with things and good God-fearing people suffer? You know, it's a question. It's a question. And again, unbelievers will use this as an excuse to reject God and Bible and Christianity. We come to Malachi chapter 3. Malachi chapter 3. Verses 13 through 15. And this is what Solomon is observing as he's analyzing life in the days of his vanity and recording observations. Remember, he's on a search. He's conducting an experiment. This is a research project to try to figure out, what is life all about? What is that good for the sons of men that they should do all the days of their life? In Malachi chapter 3, we read in verses 13 through 15, the Lord says, your words have been stout against me, saith the Lord. Yet ye say, what have we spoken so much against thee? You've said it is vain to serve God. There are people like that. They think what we're doing today is a waste of time. Look at all the things you could be doing today. Besides this, you could sleep in if you worked extra hard this week, for starters. It is vain to serve God. And what profit is it that we have kept His ordinance and that we have walked mournfully before the Lord of hosts? What did it get us? And now we call the proud happy, and that work wickedness are set up. Yea, they that tempt God are even delivered. So it just seems to us that serving God is a great big waste of time. So, but there's one thing for sure that this observation that Solomon has made teaches us. One thing for sure, because seeing the righteous perish in their righteousness and seeing the wicked prolonging their days in their wickedness becomes for us as believers a trial. A trial, listen, that will reveal why a person serves God. Do you serve God for personal profit in love to yourself, or do you serve God because it is the right thing to do in love to God, whether it pays or not in this world? See? What are you really in it for? Are you in it for you? Are you in it for Him? Is it for love of self? Is it for love of God? Are you serving God for this reason? It's the right thing to do if I am killed in doing it, or because of it. Simply because it's the right thing. That's what virtue is. I've taught you that repeatedly in the past, that virtue is doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, whether it pays off or not in this life. Even if it causes me to perish, it's still the right thing to do. That's a trial. And the Lord allows us to see this and experience this and to look within ourselves and ask, why am I really doing this? Do not ever join this church, get baptized and join this church because you think that that will be your ticket to health and wealth. Don't ever do it. Look at Greg Oley. Case in point. See? There you go. Do it because God said do it, and it's the right thing to do. When my grandson Justin came to me at a very young age to discuss being baptized, this was his reason, because God said to do it. That's a pretty good reason, I think. Amen. That's a pretty good reason. How do you argue with that one? But now, you see, if you're viewing things only under the sun, as Solomon is often doing, then it does make you scratch your head and wonder, does it pay to serve God when in the end, it seems like righteous, wicked, they all just both end up dying. Foolish and wise come to the same end. You might scratch your head and wonder if it's worth it all. But when you view things in relation to the day of eternal judgment, to that day that is más allá del sol, as the Spanish sing, beyond the sun. When you look at it that way, then you come to the conclusion, the very sound conclusion, it is better to perish earlier here in righteousness than to have one's days prolonged here in wickedness. A whole lot better. It's better to do the right thing and die sooner than it is to do the wrong thing and live longer. And this is exactly the conclusion the psalmist reached in Psalm 73. If you'll go back there and let's finish it out. Let's finish it out. Not meaning to weary you with overmuch reading, but the verses are just saying it so plainly, why not let them speak to us? This is what you call preaching the Word. And so the psalmist is struggling with this thing of the prosperity of the wicked versus the fact that he is plagued and chastened every morning, all day long. And so he's thinking this over, and then he goes to church. And he learns something in church. And this just balances it all out, settles the argument for him. He said in verse 16, when I thought to know this, it was too painful for me until I went into the sanctuary of God. I went to the house of God. I went to church. And then I understood their end. The pastor must have preached on the eternal judgment of God and the end of the wicked in the lake of fire. Must have heard a sermon about that. Then understood I their end. Talking about these wicked people that live these long lives, prolonging their days in their wickedness. He said, surely thou didst set them in slippery places. They think they are secure, but they're in a real slippery place. Thou castest them down into destruction. They are brought into desolation as in a moment. They are utterly consumed with terrors. As a dream when one awaketh, so, O Lord, when thou awakest, thou shalt despise their image. See, right now God looks like He's sleeping through all the injustice, but He is not. There will be a day when it'll look like He's awakened to the issue. And when He does, when thou awakest, thou shalt despise their image. Thus my heart was grieved, and I was pricked in my reins. So foolish was I and ignorant. I was as a beast before thee. You know, to think the way I thought was so stupid of me, is what he's saying. I was as dumb as a beast. Nevertheless, oh, I love this verse. Oh, have you ever had times in your life when you felt like you were foolish and stupid and ask yourself, what was I thinking? Of course you've had those times. We've all had those times. But oh, aren't you glad you can turn the page and find this? Nevertheless. I'm continually with thee, and thou hast holding me by my right hand. Lord, you don't abandon me because sometimes I'm stupid. Isn't that beautiful? You still love me, still with me. Thou shalt guide me with thy counsel, and afterward receive me to glory. So God's going to give you your answers that you need, sufficient. He may not answer all your questions, but He'll give you enough to help you to muddle your way through this world, and then He'll take you to heaven when it's over. Now that's not a bad deal, is it? And whom have I in heaven but thee? And there is none upon earth that I desire beside thee. Let me give you a little piece of advice. Look at that verse. Whom have I in heaven but thee? And there's none upon earth that I desire beside thee. Let's be honest. One of the things we all look forward to is going to heaven and seeing people we loved on this earth over there. We all look forward to that. But never let that be the number one reason you want to go there. My mother would say, Ben, with her Alzheimer's, she'd repeat it it was just like a tape recorder every week when she still had mind enough to do it. I'd put her off the car, and she'd say, Ben, I want you to pray for the Lord to take me. I'm tired. I want to see my Lord. Not my husband, not my mother, not my dad, but my Lord. That's the key thing we want to look forward to. And all the other goodies will come ancillary and secondary to that. And so he says, my flesh and my heart faileth. Your flesh, that's your body. And that happens as we get older. But not only does our flesh fail, but our heart, which includes our mind, that fails too. You can't remember as well. You don't think as fast. My flesh and my heart faileth, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. For lo, they that are far from thee shall perish, and thou hast destroyed all them that go a-whoring from thee. But it is good for me to draw near to God. I have put my trust in the Lord, that I may declare all thy works. So you see, the psalmist reaches a conclusion that it's, that even though the wicked perish, it's temporary. Their end is a miserable one indeed. You see, turn to Isaiah 57. I did this in my funeral sermon that I did here for Greg, or for you, about Greg. I didn't do it for him. He didn't care anything about it. He had better things to occupy his mind than what's going on down here. And considering how all that turned out, I'm really glad he's there. Yes, indeed. Amen. I'd like to be there with him. Isaiah 57, 1 through 2. And this is exactly what Solomon had been observing. The righteous perisheth. The good folks are dying off. And no man layeth it to heart. Really ought to think about that. And merciful men are taken away, none considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. And what's going to happen to that guy that may be taken out of this world early? He shall enter into peace. They shall rest in their beds, each one walking in his uprightness. You see, he may perish in his righteousness in this world, but look what he enters into the next. Then look at 2 Kings 22, an example of one that died prematurely, being taken away from the evil to come. There's a blessing. Sometimes death is a blessing. It's an answer to prayer. In 2 Kings 22:18, but to the king of Judah, this is King Josiah. He had found the book of the law, and they started reading it, and he looked at the moral condition of the nation and realized, man, we are in trouble. And he looked at all the prophecies of what God was going to do to this people because of their idolatry and their sin, and he rent his garments and wept, and he was really worried about what was coming to his nation. But to the king of Judah, which sent you to inquire of the Lord, this was the prophetess, thus shall you say to him, thus saith the Lord of Israel, as touching the words which thou hast heard, because thine heart was tender, and thou hast humbled thyself before the Lord, when thou heardest what I spake against this place, and against the inhabitants thereof, and against that they should become a desolation and a curse, and thou hast rent thy clothes, and wept before me, I also have heard thee, saith the Lord. Behold, therefore, I will gather thee unto thy fathers, and thou shalt be gathered into thy grave in peace, and thine eyes shall not see all the evil which I will bring upon this place. So you see, when one perishes here in his righteousness, he's being taken away from the evil to come and entering into peace. Exactly what we see here with Josiah. But what about those wicked people whose lives are prolonged in their wickedness? What's going on there? I'll tell you what's going on. Come on to Romans chapter 9 and verse 22 and ask yourself, would you rather have a shorter life doing the right thing, when at the end of it you're going to enter into peace, into the presence of God, resting and walking in your uprightness, or would you rather live longer in this world and then wind up in hell? Look at Romans 9:22. This is the case with those, with the wicked whose lives are prolonged in their wickedness. Romans 9:22. What if God, willing to show his wrath, watch it now, and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering, while those wicked people are having their party life, prolonging their life in their wickedness? God is not approving of that. Do not take from that circumstance that God approves the life they're living. He's enduring it with much long suffering. These vessels of wrath fitted to destruction. You see, that's what the psalmist saw in Psalm 83, that these people would end in destruction, no matter how long they lived or how good their life was here. And then, lastly, Psalm 92 and verse 7. Psalm 92 and verse 7. When the wicked spring as grass, when all the workers of iniquity do flourish, exactly what was described in Job 21 and Psalm 73. Why is it? Why is it they're allowed to live long in their wickedness and flourish therein? It is that they shall be destroyed forever. It's just like they're ripening for eternal destruction. So would you rather live a shorter life in righteousness and go to heaven, or a longer life in wickedness and go to hell? That's what it boils down to. That puts it all into perspective. Now let's go back to Ecclesiastes. We're done with that verse. We're ready for the next one. Excuse me. I need to get something here. Ecclesiastes 7. Excuse me. I was feeling a little weak, so I got something to help me out there. You say it doesn't sound like it. Well, but I'm on the inside here. I know what's going on. Now listen to this one. Now listen to what I'm saying here. Be not righteous over much. You wonder, my goodness, how in the world can you overdo being right? That's the question we propose to answer here. Be not righteous over much, neither make thyself over wise. Why shouldest thou destroy thyself? So Solomon in this verse and in the next is going to warn against extremes of righteousness and wisdom. Well, in this verse, he's going to warn against extremes of righteousness and wisdom. In the next one, he's going to warn against extremes in wickedness. So it's obvious from this verse that there is a possibility of being righteous over much and being over wise. Almost like you can be too good and too smart. And to do this is to run the risk of destroying yourself. Now the question is, how can a person be righteous over much? And if you think about it, it comes clear as clear can be. For example, it is righteous to help the poor. Now, you know that if you're a Bible reader, but you know, when I say things like that, I like to give verses just to show you that we're commanded to give to the poor. It's a righteous thing to do. Deuteronomy 15:11. For the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt open thine hand wide unto thy brother, to thy poor, and to thy needy in thy land. And listen to the instruction of the Lord Jesus Christ. This very principle carries over into the New Testament. In Luke chapter 11 and verse 41, but rather give alms of such things as ye have. What are alms? They're gifts to the poor. Alms of such things as you have, and behold, all things are clean unto you. And chapter 12:33, sell that you have and give alms. You say, well, I don't have any money to give to the poor. You got a nice boat sitting there in the garage, sell it. Then you'll have something to give to the poor. Sell that you have and give alms. Provide yourselves bags which wax not old, a treasure in the heavens that faileth not, where no thief approacheth, neither moth corrupteth. And so there you've got it. It's a righteous thing to help the poor, but should we help the poor to such an extreme that we deprive ourselves and our families of their needs? Absolutely not. Because then you're going to bump into this verse. 1 Timothy 5:8. If a man provide not for his own, especially those of his own household, he's worse than an infidel and has denied the faith. So you see, you got to take all the commandments, and when you put them all together, you get a balance. So yes, it's righteous to help the poor, but don't be righteous over much to where you're depriving yourself and your family of their needs. And do not be helping the poor when in reality you're not helping them, but you're subsidizing them in their laziness and irresponsibility. You got to balance it out. It's righteous to help the suffering. I'm not going to read the passage. You should be familiar with it, the story of the Good Samaritan. How he helped that man that was left, fell among thieves and was left half dead and wounded, and how he took him and poured oil and wine into his wounds and took him to an inn and paid for him to stay there in the inn until he was well enough to be up and about on his own. And it's a righteous thing to help the suffering. But are we to carry that to such an extreme that we're allowed no pleasure because there are people that suffer in the world? Do we go to that extreme? Well, if we do, then we bump into this verse in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 and 18. Yes, there is suffering in the world that we can help relieve, and there always will be suffering in the world that we can help relieve, but we don't go to such an extreme that we deny ourselves any pleasure or comfort in this life. And then I've taught about this before. Who are we responsible to help among the suffering? I've given you instruction on that. It's the people that we encounter in the daily course of life. God does not hold us responsible for relieving all the suffering of all men in all the world. That is an impossible burden. You try to do that and you'll destroy yourself. You can't do it. So God gives you examples and ways to put boundaries on this that are practicable, doable, and livable. Because God's commandments are not grievous. But in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 and 18, charge them that are rich in this world, that they be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who giveth richly all things to enjoy. See, we're allowed to enjoy things. That they do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to distribute, willing to communicate. Have a mind that whenever you encounter a genuine need or encounter genuine suffering, you're there to help and relieve. That they do good and be rich in good works, ready to distribute and willing to communicate. Now, it's a righteous thing for a minister to preach the gospel and serve God's people. I'm not going to give you a verse to prove that. I'm just going to tell you you've got 3 epistles in the Bible that talk about it. 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus, plus 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians, it's amazing when you look at it how much it addresses the office of the ministry. It actually is very ministerial in its orientation. So you really got 4 epistles that clearly teach that it's a righteous thing for a minister to preach the gospel and serve God's people. But should a minister do it to such an extreme that destroys his health prematurely and therefore his usefulness? Absolutely not. Colossians chapter 3 talks about, Colossians 2:23 talks about which things have indeed a show of wisdom and will worship and humility and neglecting of the body, not in any honor to the satisfying of the flesh. God doesn't expect us to neglect the needs of our bodies in serving Him. We need to keep our bodies in health and nourishment so that with that we can serve Him. And then there is this verse. And oh man, have I ever relied on this one over the years, and I still do. In Psalm 127, 1 and 2, except the Lord build the house, and in this particular case, the church of God, they labor in vain that build it. I can't build this church if God doesn't. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. I could serve 24/7, and I can't keep this church doing that. This is the Lord's. It's His to build, it's His to keep, and if He doesn't do it, I labor in vain. It's vain for you to rise up early and to sit up late and to eat the bread of sorrows, for so He giveth His beloved sleep. You can be so zealous in ministering, you deprive yourself of needed rest that God gives. You see the point? There is a being righteous overmuch, to where a man ends up destroying himself prematurely. And then how about Mark 8:38? We have this commandment from Christ. Mark 8:38. Whosoever therefore shall be ashamed of me, said Jesus, and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him also shall the Son of Man be ashamed when He cometh in His glory, in the glory of His Father with the holy angels. We are supposed to unashamedly bear witness to the truth. But does that mean that had we lived in communist Russia, that we should have gone out into Red Square and proclaimed openly that Jesus Christ is Lord? And atheism, communistic atheism, is a lie? Should we have done that? Well, had we done that, well, we would have destroyed ourselves. We would have died before our time. And then how could we boldly proclaim the truth? Because the dead do not bear witness to the truth. Go to a cemetery sometime and see how many sermons you hear there. They cannot bear witness to the truth. And how do you reconcile this commandment to unashamedly bear witness to the truth to something we read about one of the greatest champions for truth, who was none other than the Apostle Paul himself? In Acts chapter 9, yes, we are unashamedly to bear witness to the truth, but in such a way that we can continue to do so. I mean, to just shut up altogether and never say anything to anybody at all about the truth because it could cost us our life. No, that's an extreme. We just have to look for ways in which we can do it and continue to do it. without running unnecessary risk. If we cannot avoid martyrdom, then we should go to it with grace like Christ. But if we can avoid martyrdom and still continue to minister, it's the thing to do. And we can see this in Acts 9, 23 through 25. And here Paul is out there preaching Jesus Christ in synagogues. And we read in Acts 9, 23 that after many days were fulfilled, the Jews took counsel to kill him. But their lying await was known of Saul. And they watched the gates day and night to kill him. Then the disciples took him by night and let him down by a basket in the wall, or let him down by the wall in a basket. Thank God they did, because this was early on in his life and ministry. Think of how much unashamed declaration of truth we have in his epistles we would never have had he not taken measures to preserve his life against those who took counsel to kill him. So you see, to just have gone out in the streets of Damascus and said, Jesus Christ is the Son of God, virgin born, risen from would have been a bold witness to the truth, but it'd have been a dead man doing it, don't you see? It is righteous to tell the truth. We know that. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Lie not one to another. But is a thief or a murderer entitled to the truth from us at the risk of someone's property or someone's life? Were they to be faulted in World War II who hid Jews in their home, and then when people came to inquire, are there any Jews here, and they said no when they had them hidden in an attic? Was that wrong? Just go read Joshua chapter 2, 1 through 6, where Rahab hid the spies upon a roof. And when they came to inquire about it, because they'd seen them go in her house, she said, well, they came here and they went out this way. They went out the gate. Go after them and you'll find them. Telling a lie to protect the lives of these men of God. No, it's righteous to tell the truth, but I mean, if a thief comes up to you and says, you got any money? You might have $100 stashed down in somewhere in your sock. It's perfectly okay to say, no, I don't. I've done that. I've done that. I had money stuffed in a sock when I crossed the border out of East Germany. I never told them a word. Never told them a thing. Why, those thieves, they weren't entitled to my money. Linda wanted me to throw it away. She was afraid I'd get arrested, and I would have had they found it out. But I'm not giving those thieves my money. I'm not doing it. Got across the border in the western, I told him on the western side of Germany what I'd done, and he said, if they'd found that out, you'd have been thrown right in jail. Made Linda nervous. But are you getting the idea, people? How you can be righteous over much? You can take things God has said and take them to an extreme that God never intended. Charles Bridges put it this way: Christian duties are pressed beyond their due proportion, interfering with immediate obligations and making sins where God has not made them. So yes, be not overmuch righteous. And then be not overmuch wise. How can you be over wise? Well, we've kind of addressed this one already, but we'll hit it again. You can be over wise. You can try to know more than you need to know. And it's important, as I've taught you already, that you don't bog down your mind with more information than it can reasonably sort out. I've read that Confucius' son said to his father, he said, I give diligence to study everything, and I don't neglect anything whereby I might be more clever and brilliant, and yet I do not seem to advance. To which Confucius replied, quit trying to learn so much. You're bogging your brain down with too much. Limit it. And don't you young people go home and use this with your parents to say, you are over bogging my brain with information. Let up. I thought I better stick that one in there. As these dudes are clever, they'll find. One mother just said, thank you. But she knew she was going to have that one handed back to her later in the day. These kids are smart. In areas where they would best not be. But Be not overwise. Don't try to know more than you need to know or overbog your mind with information. This is one of my problems with the internet. There's just too much out there to stuff our heads with. I can guarantee you people, and there's a lot about this book I don't know, and let me say that. The more I know about it, the more I realize I don't know. But I guarantee you, I would not know what I do if my mind was so scattered out on learning all these other kinds of things besides my Bible. So, got to limit the scope of the knowledge. As we noted before when we looked at this about knowledge bringing sorrow, we cannot know everything, nor should we try to know everything. Scripture teaches us to set boundaries on our pursuit of knowledge. And let me just give you a few of the verses I gave you before to remind you of what we've already taught you, to set boundaries on our pursuit of knowledge. In Psalm 131:1, Lord, my heart is not haughty, nor mine eyes lofty, neither do I exercise myself in great matters or in things too high for me. There's just some things that are just bigger than I can put my head around. And unfortunately, a lot of times what drives people to know more than they need to know is pride, so they can pass for being so smart. Then Proverbs 16 and verse 27, Psalm 16:27. An ungodly man diggeth up evil. Be careful about going on witch hunts. And in his lips there is a burning fire. Just digging up stuff, trying to find out as much bad stuff as you can find. You search long enough, hard enough, you'll find so much you won't even be able to contain it. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 11, 2 Thessalonians 3:11, for we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. You see, busybodies are people that are trying to find out stuff that isn't any of their business. There's just some things it's just not your business to know. Leave it alone. And I mean, I'm just top watering this. I mean, I've preached on this before and gone into greater detail on this and so many things, and I can't always go into detail on everything. I'd never get done here. In 2 Peter 1:5 and 6, this has been a favorite of mine. 2 Peter 1:5 and 6, and beside this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge. And notice the next thing he says to add to knowledge, temperance. You know what temperance is? That's setting boundaries. That's self-restraint. You can't know everything. Don't try to know everything. Don't try to discover every evil scheme that may be out there in the world. Be wise concerning that which is good and simple concerning that which is evil. Run everything through the grid of this. Know this, and you'll be safe. You'll be safe. And then Revelation 2:24. Revelation 2:24. But I say unto you, and unto the rest in Thyatira, as many as have not this doctrine, and which have not known the depths of Satan as they speak, I will put upon you no other burden. You don't need to dig in all that evil. He's actually speaking this to the commendation of some people in Thyatira that weren't digging into stuff that they didn't need to. You see, I've learned in my life, there is an advantage at times in being able to honestly say, I don't know and I don't understand. That's just one that's just too big for me. I'll have to let God deal with it. Charles Bridges, commenting on this verse, said, and I'm studying his commentary, it was given to me by Mike Birmingham as I've been going through this. To be wise up to what is written is diligence, abound in obligation. To be wise above that which is written is presumption, as if affecting to be acquainted with the whole of divine truth. To intrude into God's province of secret things is over wisdom. Trying to know more than you need to know will open you to the occult. Why do you think people go to palm readers and go to people that look in crystal balls or read cards? Because they want somebody to be able to tell them what's going to happen tomorrow. That's an open door to the occult. Trying to know more than you need to know. To intrude into God's province of secret things is over wisdom, passing the boundary line, vainly puffed up by his fleshly mind. Deuteronomy 29:29 tells us this, the secret things belong unto the Lord our God. But those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law. And then Colossians 2:18. See, leave the secret things where just that, secret things. Don't try to be wise above what is written. Just like I told you in the Bible study the other night, where it talks about those bodies of the saints which slept, that rose after the resurrection of Christ, when their graves were opened in connection with the earthquake and the rocks rent. And I said, I can't tell you a whole lot about that because there's not a lot told about it. I can tell you what it says, but beyond that, there's not a lot of information I can give you. And there are things like that in the Bible. There's things in here that are prophetic in nature that will give us a general hazy idea, but I can't nail down the details. And according to Christ, I won't know it until it's fulfilled. I'll not be able to nail down those details. And all this desire to know the future can open up doors you need to keep closed. Colossians 2:18, let no man beguile you of your reward in a voluntary humility and worshiping of angels, intruding into those things which he hath not seen, vainly puffed up by his fleshly mind. And so putting these two things together about be not overmuch righteous, listen to me, and be not overmuch wise, listen to me, children. I want to ask you a question. Do you need to investigate every business and service you use to see if they support something sinful before you use them? Let me repeat that question. Listen to it. Do you need to investigate every business and every service you use to see if they support something sinful before you use them? If such is the case, you will not be able to do business in this world. You will have to go out of this world. And Paul made that very plain in 1 Corinthians 5, 9, and 10. Do I have to spend hours before I go shopping at Walmart? Do I have to go online and investigate every evil thing that Walmart might happen to support, or every evil way they may come by the goods that I buy in their store, and then say, well, because they do this, I cannot shop there? You're going to back yourself into a corner where the only way out for you is to go out and live on some remote piece of property somewhere away from civilization and just completely support yourself. That's what you'll have to do. I mean, look here in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, 9, and 10. I wrote unto you in an epistle not to company with fornicators. And that's talking about within the church. He said, yet not altogether, not in all ways and in all respects, with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetous, or extortioners, or with idolaters, for then ye must needs go out of the world. The only way to avoid dealing with wicked people is to leave this world. And that'll come soon enough, folks. And if a wicked construction is not apparent up front in something you indulge, the best thing to do is just make no inquiry further. And you have instruction from Paul on that in 1 Corinthians 10, 25 through 27. Whatsoever is sold in shambles, meat markets, that eat, asking no question for conscience sake. Now it was entirely possible in that meat market, that piece of steak you bought that morning had been offered in sacrifice to a pagan god the day before. Every possibility. But you don't go in there and while you're selecting meat say, now was this offered in sacrifice to idols? Don't do that. Just buy the meat and thank God for the meat. Whatsoever is sold in shambles, that eat, asking no question for conscience sake. Why? For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and meat belongs to God. Receive it as a gift from Him. For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And if any of them believe not, bid you to a feast, and you be disposed to go, whatsoever is set before you, eat, asking no question for conscience sake. Don't say, no, before I can eat this, was this offered to... Maybe the guy's a pagan. Was this offered to an idol before you eat? Don't ask the question. Say a prayer of thanks to God for the food and eat it. That's his advice. And I mean people. I'm not advising you to do this because I've already done it, but I'm doing this to make an illustration. Go online and look at how many businesses support Planned Parenthood, which promotes abortion. It is staggering. I guarantee you, any of you went to Starbucks today to pick up a coffee? Go find what they support. It's right on there. Businesses that support it either directly or indirectly through other organizations that support Planned Parenthood. There's a whole long list, and I guarantee you every single one of us in here wears clothes, buys food, buys products from these people. But does that mean that I'm doing what they're doing, that I support it? No. The guilt lies on them, not on me. I'm just doing business in the world. I watched a film put out by the Environmental Health Trust, the EH Trust. It's called Complicit. And they talk about the Chinese and the young people that leave the rural areas to go to the cities to make a living. And they go and work in these factories that produce the electronic goods like your iPads and your iPods and your iPhones and your smartphones and your computers that you use every day and like because it's convenient. And they are being exposed to toxic chemicals that are causing some of them to become very sick, and the government is doing nothing to try to control it. Now, because you use an electronic device, does that mean you're responsible for what's being done over there? You see what I'm saying, people? You've got to be careful. You'll back yourself into a corner and a way of life you will not be able to live. And I can give you something that should set your conscience to rest on this issue if you're having a problem with it. The fact that you may be buying something from a store that supports some things you heartily in good conscience oppose. Let me set a troubled conscience to rest right now, so I don't end up with an email about 7 pages long and about 3,500 questions about this. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Turn to Daniel 2, 47 through 49 and understand something about the Babylonian Empire. These men, as I am going to read to you, held positions in the bureaucracy of Babylon. Babylon was an idolatrous, morally corrupt empire that expanded by means of murder and pillage. You read Habakkuk 2. I'll leave it on your own clock. Habakkuk 2, verses 5 through 20. It will describe how Babylon was idolatrous, how they abused the environment, how they shed blood, destroyed property, robbed to increase their wealth, and were morally corrupt with out-and-out sex perversion in Babylon. And yet here, Daniel, Meshach, and Abednego, read it in verses 47 through 49. The king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods, and a Lord of lords, Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men in Babylon. I mean, he had a head honcho government post. You said, yeah, but look at what King Nebuchadnezzar just confessed. Well, this same Nebuchadnezzar, keep reading the next chapter, where he builds an idol and demands that everybody bow to it. You see, these pagans, they could allow for the religion of the Hebrews, the religion of Christians, you know, be tolerant, everybody has their view. Just because they acknowledge the God of Israel doesn't mean they abandoned all their pagan gods in the process. Not so. But here he is, a great man. And the king gave him, verse 48, many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. And then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. Government jobs in one of the most morally, religiously corrupt empires in human history. But did that make Daniel and the 3 Hebrew children, does that mean they approved of that? Does that mean they supported it? Absolutely not. And when put in a position to prove the medal, when they were asked to fall down before a pagan god, they refused to. It'd be the same as you working for a company that may be supporting things that you do not morally approve, but then they come and they make you sign some document that says that I approve of transgenderism. That's where you draw your line. That's where you draw your line. But otherwise, do your job faithfully as unto the Lord and keep your mouth shut. And when you have an opportunity to speak the truth and witness, yes, do so. But sometimes times will dictate that wisdom is you operate under the radar. And you need Bible examples of that. I've given them to you in the past. Look at the prophets of God that were hidden away by this guy in the reign of King Ahab. I believe his name was Obadiah. Is that his name? Let me see if Alzheimer's is kicking in yet. Let me see who he was. Yeah, that was his name. I had it right. Oh, that feels so good. Obadiah was hiding the prophets of God away. It was a time for a low profile when Jezebel and Ahab were at a peak in their idolatry. But you see, this is the idea of being overmuch wise, overmuch righteous. You just end up destroying yourself, backing yourself into a corner where you can't survive in a sinful world. I hope this has been helpful. Well, God willing, we get next time about be overmuch wicked. But let me say this, kids, listen. This verse that says, be not overmuch wicked, is not giving you license to be a little bit wicked. Now, just understand, you adults too. We're all sinners. We'd all like a freebie, wouldn't we? I've had a rough day. I earned a freebie. No, you have not. Be not overmuch wicked does not mean you can be a little bit. Just take my word for it till we come back in 2 weeks, God willing, and flesh it all out for you. Thank you for your patient attention. God pardon any error and bless the truth. In Jesus' name, amen.